The autumn sales arrive and Steam, as always, brings its bounty unto bear. But alas, if you're like me, you may be staving off, ready for that Christmas sale yet to come, and so today we'll be taking a look at some of the different games you can pick up, all of which for less than 1,000 yen. It's approximately $8.82 as of the time of recording, so for less than 10 bucks, just exactly what can you get your paws on? So after trawling through the vast array of strategy games currently on the autumn sale, here are some of the top picks for games under $10. And in no particular order, let's begin with Oriental Empires. This is a very unique title, being a real-time turn-based strategy game. Now I know that doesn't really make a whole lot of sense, but basically both the player and the AI will plan out their moves before hitting end turn and having all the moves act at the same time. Now certainly it can lead to some odd occurrences of cat and mouse with you chasing after the AI's units, but when war is finally enacted, you'll definitely know about it. The game was released back in 2017 and has seen multiple updates and patches since then, initially being released in early access and then reaching its full release with plenty enough content for any strategy gaming fan. When you start the game, you will have a selection of different factions, with other factions then becoming unlocked as you proceed to improve your skills, enact war, and complete a campaign for the many houses you play. The strategical considerations are extremely good, allowing you to maneuver your armies into the best positions, taking advantage of terrain, flanking, as well as outnumbering your foes, all in an effort to conquer your inferiors. However, the real reason I would suggest this game is the simple reason that it has one of the more interesting and actually accessible empire building mechanics that I've come across in a turn-based strategy game. Building up multiple settlements and developing trade routes is absolutely paramount to the success of each of your campaigns, and something I've taken great joy in organizing every single time I've returned to the Oriental Empires. Playing in much a similar manner to that of Civilization, any 4X gamer will feel right at home as they endeavor to develop the ancient Chinese civilizations. From fighting your battles to developing technologies, culture, religion, and even alliances to further develop your empire. And being one that certainly slipped under the radar for many a strategy gaming fan, with the game currently on an 80% discount and going for 596 yen, you can now pick up the game alongside the DLC of Genghis or Three Kingdoms for less than $10. Next on our marvelous strategy list comes a title that may seem a little bit out of place: Shadow Tactics: Blades of the Shogun. Now, this is a real-time strategy game. Yes, it is entirely based around stealth mechanics, but each mission feels more like a puzzle, providing plenty of opportunities for players to take full advantage of all the abilities of each of their assassins in order to outwit and outmaneuver the many guards that stand in your path, each with their own unique abilities, advantages, and disadvantages, players to take into account and consider as they go about a fairly substantial story, especially considering that, depending on your skill, for me, a single mission can take a fair while to complete, particularly if you don't want to get caught while you're at it. And with the ability to pause the game and queue up multiple different moves from all your different characters, depending on how you play this, it actually can feel more like a turn-based strategy game with a real-time component to enact your plan and see you edge ever closer to victory. And the game is currently on a very generous 90% off, coming in at 448 yen, or roughly $5. And even if you're not 100% sure whether or not this game is for you, as I certainly wasn't when I was checking this out, there is a demo option available, so you can go ahead and download this for free, give the game a good try, and make the decision yourself. But with the combination of ninjas, samurais, shinobi, and one rather cantankerous old man, his faithful little companion, Blades of the Shogunate definitely has plenty to offer. And with a pending future DLC, now is certainly a great time to pick it up and get ready for the new features to come. Though if you prefer more of a true turn-based strategy game, then we come along to Mordheim, City of the Damned. From within the wondrous Warhammer Fantasy universe, a small side game known as Mordheim evolved, with vastly reduced parties and gaming in skirmishes across the city of Mordheim, all of which seeking out their fortunes in forms of weird stone and the various loot left behind by the many warbands before them. The game plays out as a fairly standard turn-based strategy, with the slight caveat of it being a free movement system, meaning you are given a circular radius from which you can move rather than a tile set, with of course elevation then playing into it. However, the real fun for Mordheim comes into the fact that it is insanely unforgiving, as your party will persist throughout your campaign as well as any skirmishes or online games you play. Your victories will certainly be noted, but also your defeats. The game is rather hardcore, with characters being knocked out, then at the end of the game having their fates decided by dice. You could walk away with a scar across your face, striking fear into your opponents. You could not walk away without a leg, or you may never make it back at all. The story of your party will develop throughout your campaign, not only through the story-based missions included, but also through their victories and defeats, the legacy they build as they develop, but also as they fail. Now, it definitely does need to be noted that there is a lot of content that is not included in the base game. This ranges from factions through to individual units. Given that the standard City of the Damned is currently on sale at 80% off, putting it at 496 yen or around about $5 again, you would need to add on a further 2,378 yen to get the full DLC experience. Or if you pick up the DLC bundles, you can get this for significantly less, with each bundle being 247 yen alone. This will provide you with the additional units, though not the additional factions, those being the Undead and the Witch Hunters. Though, even sticking with the core game, there is still plenty enough there, with the Empire, Sisters of Sigmar, Skaven, and Chaos available within the base game, with plenty of different units for these factions and a fair amount of ability to customize each individual unit as they develop. That is of course if they last long enough, and given my last campaign, that may be a tricky one. But next up, and shifting gears entirely to more of a real-time cinematic gameplay, we have Halo Wars Definitive Edition. Now, I can't speak much for the multiplayer, as honestly I have never even tried it. I can say that the single player is a must-play for any Halo fan, and a pretty darn solid strategy title for any of you RTS fans out there, which, given that you're watching this video, is probably going to be you. Quite honestly, Halo Wars is a very nice introduction to the RTS genre. Being brought out on consoles meant that a lot of things had to be simplified and fairly streamlined in order for console gamers to be able to play them. That is to say that when using a controller, RTS can be fairly tricky, though the controls translate extremely well onto mouse and keyboard. Something that I was genuinely rather impressed by. But controls and my personal favorite UI aside, the RTS component of the game is a solid one, providing you plenty of opportunities to develop different forces for each different faction and send them forth to cause absolute chaos upon your enemies. With the UNSC sporting their shiniest armor, just destroying things with tanks, the Covenant providing plenty of fast attack as well as some highly destructive plasma fire, and the Flood being the Flood. And given that the game is currently on offer for 65% off, running in at 700 yen, or slightly less than $8, if you ever want to know a little bit more of the backstory to the Halo franchise, this game is a great way to do it. The cinematics are extremely well made, and though the storyline does raise a few questions of its own, it provides plenty of enough reason to give it a try, with the surprisingly good RTS being an extremely pleasant add-on. But if that's not quite to your taste, and maybe you prefer rushing forward and smashing your enemy while your units do whatever they can in the background, then perhaps Kingdom Under Fire, Heroes, or the Crusades is for you. Now, I definitely have a massive personal stake in this game, seeing as Kingdom Under Fire Heroes was actually my favorite game back on the Xbox, and yes, this is a port from the original Xbox title. It is an incredibly fun and very unique blend of real-time strategy and hack-and-slash combat. Both games provide a range of different characters to play, with each character coming from a different faction and sporting different units. And though you are limited to the amount of units you can bring into each mission, the combination of forces you can muster is absolutely staggering, with infantry developing through from lightly armored all the way to heavy and even magical should you wish, to cavalry units, flying support, ginormous monsters, tactical sappers, and siege equipment all at your disposal. And that's without even getting into the different special abilities that come alongside each of the captains that are fully customizable and upgradable at the head of each of your units, with then each of these units also being upgradable, taking on the skills of the captain that is in their charge, and gaining bonuses from the various equipment you afford them. And the reason I bring up both simultaneously is not for the fact that together they would be less than 1,000 yen, because they're actually 995 each. Though at 50% off, that's definitely something to bear in mind, but the simple fact that both games pretty much play exactly the same. Now, Crusaders came first with Heroes then after, but they're only a year apart. You don't actually need to have played one before the other. And also allows me to be a little bit cheeky and promote both games at the same time. Huzzah. But either way, by picking one up, you will also gain access to the soundtrack. And this is something that is extremely important because, quite frankly, it has the greatest soundtrack ever introduced to any game ever, bar none. Fight me, I challenge you. Before I get utterly carried away by this, let us move on to once more a very underrated title. What is essentially the continuation of the 40k Armageddon series and the prelude to the modern battle sector, Sanctus Reach. This turn-based strategy game will have you playing as the Space Wolves, setting forth against the Greenskin War, utilizing a wide range of the Space Wolves unit roster, alongside some Imperial Knights for good measure. In terms of mechanics, the game is a fairly standard grid-based TBS, affording you different bonuses from attacking via terrain, flanking, as well as of course different armaments doing different damage against different enemies, with plenty of variation in your combat depending on the different skills available to the many different units, which really can't be stressed enough. However, the most interesting part of the game is that it's split into separate little campaigns, and each of these campaigns will allow you to upgrade the units as you progress through each mission. It's not quite at the extent of one solid long campaign where you're massively customizing and upgrading your Space Marines as you go, but it's enough to keep you satisfied, particularly for a title that, as of right now, is going at 75% off for a mere 745 yen. Now, you can't quite add on any of the DLC and get that under the 1,000 yen mark, though I would say that these DLC, at least for a Warhammer fan, will definitely be worth it. The Horrors of the Warp adding on the Chaos faction, Sons of Cadia introducing the Imperial Guard, the Legacy of the Weird Boy adding full playability to the Greenskin Horde. Something that, yes, really should have been in the main game, however it is the cheapest DLCs, so at least we can take some solace in that. And though this does have somewhat of an old school quality coming out all the way back in 2017, if you're truly wanting to enjoy some classic 40k goodness, then of course you must check out Dawn of War. Somehow a game coming out back all the way in 2006 still looks incredible to this day. Just don't zoom in too much. Though that being said, there are plenty of mods available, some of which might just improve those visuals a little bit more. Pick your faction from some of the best that Warhammer has to offer, and descend into a renowned RTS with a community base still existing to this day. Now, what's so good about the sale going on right now for Dawn of War is you can actually pick up the Master Collection containing the original Game of the Year edition, Dark Crusade, Soulstorm, and Winter Assault, all for the low price of 949 yen, just shy of our 1,000 yen mark, and just a little less than $8.80. With 75% off and plenty of games to choose from, you will have access to the story campaigns of Warhammer 40,000 Dawn of War and Winter Assault, as well as the turn-based campaign of Dark Crusade and Soulstorm. Now, there's certainly some debate as to whether Soulstorm should be included in so grandiose a title, but considering all of them are less than $10, yeah, I'll take it. And in an effort to try and keep this a little bit shorter, I'm going to be doing these fairly fast as there are a ton of games to get through. Next up, we have Banner Saga. Now, for those of you who haven't heard of this hand-drawn epic trilogy before, then whenever there's a sale, always have a look, as it's fairly old and therefore quite often actually goes on to sale. Given how each game has plenty of replayability, as well as a fairly long story on your first run-through, it's actually pretty worth picking up one and then waiting for the next sale to pick up the next. Not that I'm a cheapskate or anything. The game plays out as a mixture of turn-based strategy and visual novel-esque storyline. In this Viking-inspired fantasy world, multiple races are all brought together in an effort to survive the emergence of a new, greater threat. With the story showing the migration with a story based around your migration, gathering up new allies, facing off against foes, and making some very hard choices. With each of the characters being fully named and realized, customization is rather limited to more how you equip them. However, between the surprisingly complex turn-based combat, requiring you to organize units to work in the most effective manner, stripping the enemy of armor before cracking in on their health, with that health directly impacting actually how much damage they can do themselves, and put alongside a very unique story that, although technically can only be played through once, the many decisions along the track will afford you the ability to go back and tweak the outcomes of the overarching narrative. And seeing how the first Banner Saga is currently on at 80% off, going for 495 yen, it would definitely be quite a good time to pick it up. So if you are feeling like splurging out, then taking a gander at the full Banner Saga trilogy really wouldn't be the worst thing on earth. And let's have ourselves a little retro break, so for anyone who has these games, no doubt you can skip forward, but for those who haven't, now is the perfect moment to check out the original Stronghold, now rendered in full HD. There are campaigns, there's skirmishes, there's multiplayer, alongside still what is possibly the greatest castle construction, empire management, and siege-based RTS there ever has and ever will be. It's currently running for a 75% off at 149 yen, so the simple fact that you can pick this up for less than a packet of Pocky, if you haven't tried it already, it seems like a pretty good time to take a dive. And next up, and substantially more expensive, although bringing a much grander collection of content, we have the Panzerkorps Gold Edition. Panzerkorps is a game very close to my heart, being an RTS I thoroughly enjoyed ever since I was, quite frankly, way too young to be playing these sort of games and actually having any chance of winning them, but they were still amazing. For those of you who've seen my run through of Armageddon 40,000, then this game will appear extremely similar, and that is because Armageddon's actually based off the old Panzerkorps engine, although incredibly streamlined. Picking up the Panzerkorps Gold Edition, yes, still doesn't give you the best resolutions known unto man, however the game stands up from the sheer complexity of the different maneuvers and campaigns you will embark upon. From attempting an all-out blitzkrieg and pushing across the map as fast as possible, to accepting more minor victories as you go, ranking up characters, organizing forces, providing awards and medals to soldiers who exemplify themselves in the field of battle. Quite honestly, this game is deserving of a full review, which perhaps could come out in the future, but if you're looking for something that'll pretty much run on any modern laptop, minus 80% off at 618 yen, with all this content, even if you have the original Panzerkorps game, getting the Gold Edition is definitely worth consideration, just so you can enjoy all the additional campaigns they introduced, including some new theaters of war. And improving those graphics just a little bit, we have Shadowrun. Now, I am showing the Shadowrun trilogy, though this would take us beyond the 1,000 yen mark, and just slightly above $10, I honestly can recommend each and every game in the series. But for the sake of argument, let's open up Dragonfall, because although Shadowrun Returns was absolutely fantastic, and some of the community-made content on that is pretty much on par with a full-blown game, Dragonfall is typically done slightly better in reviews and has a little more polish to it, allowing you to set forth in this very in-depth RTS based upon the tabletop RPG. I'm honestly a little confused in the way people are using that now. I'm used to pen and paper, so I'm going to stick with pen and paper. But think old-school D&D. Except you're playing in a cyberpunk world with the ability to hack mainframes and characters, as well as utilize magic and engage with a variety of fairy tale-esque characters, though given somewhat of a more grimdark overtone. The story will keep you engaged from the start to the end, especially if you're willing to commit yourself to more of that role-playing style, though honestly it will be the community-made content that'll keep you coming back to this again and again. Replayability is certainly not going to be an issue, and if you fancy it, maybe even try making one of your own. Let's go grab those katanas, utilize those totems, and let's replace a few of our limbs just for good measure. Because next on our list is Warhammer 40,000 Mechanicus. Now once more, I'll throw a little caveat for the DLC, you will not be able to get all of them if you're wanting to get this for less than 10 bucks, but the base game is pretty hefty on its own. You're essentially going about a dungeon crawler playing as one of the Adeptus Mechanicus, the Saying crazy in Warhammer 40,000 doesn't really narrow it down much. The members of the Imperium that specialize in learning about technology and manufacturing it for the armies of man, or at least that's a very simplified version, you set out into a Necron crypt, trying to gain knowledge from the various mechanical monstrosities that exist there, as well as, possibly, enacting the work of the Inquisition. The game is a narrative that's pretty interesting and you'll definitely enjoy playing through if you're a fan of the Warhammer 40,000 universe and really getting into the role of a member of the Adeptus Mechanicus. However, even if you're not, the gameplay stands up on its own. It's turn-based, plays much like Xcom, but with far more in the way of character customization. From character type, weapon upgrades, classes, gaining new loot, and vamping up your mighty maguses, and vamping up your soldiers as you delve ever deeper into the crypt and ever increase the awakening of the true Necron threat. Now, being a Warhammer 40,000 title along with all the others, this will often go on sale, particularly for Games Workshop events. So if you wanted to see a little more, do have a look around for plenty of reviews on the game, as I will definitely be bringing the game onto the site myself, as it's just good fun to roleplay anything in the 40k universe. And sticking with that role-playing style, we move along to Wasteland 2. Now this is the Director's Cut edition, but it is something to note as there are some differences if you're looking around for things like guides. This is a huge, expansive world and massively interactive and insanely in-depth role-playing game. In the world map, you will move around as a simple icon on an actual map, just showing you what's going on and occasionally interacting with things as they pop up or even encountering new enemies as you do. You'll have to keep track of some things such as water and radiation levels, make sure you actually make it to the next game map. But by and large, it's just a simple way to show you the scope and expanse of the world you're in. And when you do enter that game map and you start to see your characters, all fully customizable and with the ability to swap out any of the character icons for any picture of your own, a nice little addition I must say, you'll be able to play them however you want. We are talking old school RPG, you can play as the strongest person on earth with not an ounce of intelligence to them, as well as someone who simply wants to talk their way and charm the pants off of every situation. Something I'm terrible at, but it's still fun to laugh. Or be strangely good with toasters. The options really are up to you. You'll be negotiating your way through the world and taking out anything that won't agree, with your choices having a genuine impact on how your campaign plays out. The game says there's over 80 hours of gameplay, and you know what, I fully believe them. And since it's on sale now for 75% off, going for a whopping 772 yen, you're getting about 10 hours on the dollar, on a thoroughly enjoyable turn-based strategy RPG. And since I'm pretty sure we are well and truly out of time, I'm just going to chalk the last ones down to honorable mentions so we're not running for an hour. But if you're into Star Wars, give a check on Star Wars Empire at War. Especially as once more, being a bit of an older game, you can pick up the complete edition for less than $10 and enjoy probably one of the best, if not the best, Star Wars RTS games out there. At least if you're not willing to mod. From the Paradox selection, Hearts of Iron 4, currently for 900 yen, at a great 75% off, you will only have access to the base game with an insane amount of DLC available should you ever actually have the money for it, but there is tons of content in the base game alone, and you can always pick and choose those DLC as and when you want them. The game is pretty darn complex and definitely will take you a while to figure out, but if you put the time and effort into really learning how it works, there are hundreds upon thousands of hours to enjoy with Hearts of Iron 4. And if you just want to have some fun with it, then I'd really recommend checking out Alex the Rambler's stuff, as not only does he have some quite unique ways of playing the base game, but also he shows off plenty of the mods available, including some pretty darn good Star Wars ones. Next up is Xcom 2, which, surprise surprise, plays just like Xcom 1, and chances are you've already heard of it, you already know about it, so the main thing I can say is that it's currently on 90% off, going for 700 yen, and if you want to get the DLCs, well, they're over the $10 mark, but not by much. And moving on to a series that possibly needs introduction, Disgaea PC version. This is a very old school franchise of strategic or tactical RPGs, whichever you prefer, playing very similar to the Final Fantasy Tactics games, but with an emphasis on huge damage and not a small amount of grinding. The games aren't for everyone, but to those who enjoy the genre, and particularly those who enjoy animated, pixelated gaming, they are an absolute must. And with all of them on sale right now, with some of them dropping to less than $10, then why not give them a chance? They're weird, they're funny, half the time they don't make sense, but they were the introduction of Etna and dudes. Man, I need to do a playthrough of this at some point. But moving on and sticking with the oddly animated stylings, we have Banner of the Maid. And I've got to say, when I first saw this game, I was super reluctant to pick it up because I just figured it would be one of those games, if you know what I mean. But to be blunt, I have been incredibly surprised. And honestly can't actually think of what I would compare this to. It's almost like Fire Emblem got brought forward into the times of empires. The story is kind of weird, the artwork is enchanting, the gameplay deceptively difficult. But honestly, I have never been more pleasantly surprised nor had more fun with a game where I barely knew what was going on. 100% highly recommended Confusion. And with the game currently running at 50% off and just less than $8, why not give it a try and see if you'll be surprised yourself. You can always refund it after, and potentially earn some money. Spiffing Brit does some weird stuff. And at the end of that sudden and hastened run through, we've reached the end of the suggestions for games to pick up from the strategy gaming section of the Steam Autumn Sale. And hopefully in time for you guys to check them out, though do bear in mind they will always be other sales. I hope you found something good in here, and if there's any you feel that I overlooked, do give us a shout out in the comments, as honestly if no one else does, I'm going to check them out myself. Until next time, as always, peace out.